With Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight 800 miles southwest of the Chinese capital, Beijing, in the much smaller capital city of the Chinese province, Sichuan. We begin there because today, for the very first time since the People's Army went into action against the people, we have seen evidence of what happened far from Tiananmen Square. The name of the provincial city is Chengdu. It is the extent of the damage which is surprising. We have heard before that people died there in confrontation with the government. The estimates range from several to several hundred. But now we get a visual sense of how bad it was. The correspondent in this report is Vernon Mann. From the British news organization we are affiliated with, ITN.
These pictures are the first and so far only pictorial evidence of the bloody clashes here. Violence the provincial government here will not publicly admit even happened. Mayhem photographed bravely by a frightened student who wanted the world to know. The film smuggled out. The student and others who were there said police and troops brutally clubbed, beat, even stabbed demonstrators in 2 days of running battles. Now in Chengdu, all is calm beneath the overpowering statue of Mao Zedong. Like dirt under a carpet, the authorities have swept evidence of the students' fury behind the statue, where apparently they hope it will not be noticed. Burnt-out government cars and minibuses, a fire truck, a dozen or more trolley buses. Just down the road, a burnt-out dance hall. The sign outside blamed lawless elements for the damage. And across the street, real devastation, a whole block gutted. A police station, the Sunshine Glasses Factory, the Jade Palm Restaurant, and the big People's Department Store. Staff picking over the debris, no opinions offered. Unlike in Tiananmen Square, this demonstration turned into a riot. But just like Beijing, the authorities reacted with brute force.
In China tonight, suspicion is everywhere. As that report from Vernon Mann suggests, nobody wants to talk at all. The Chinese government today announced that 2 of the 21 student leaders whose pictures and names have been broadcast all over the country have been arrested. And as if to underscore its own definition of a citizen's duty, the government said 1 of the 2 men arrested had been turned in by his own family. ABC's Jackie Judd is in Beijing.
On Chinese television, Zhou Fengshi was shown climbing out of a police van, handcuffed and later being interrogated. He was arrested within hours after his name and picture were broadcast, along with those of 20 other student leaders. Viewers were told Zhou's sister and her husband turned him in, told police where he could be found. Another leader, officials report, was caught on a train heading out of Beijing. As for the case involving this man, arrested after authorities broadcast an interview pirated from ABC News, the women who reported him were honored on TV today, given certificates and the equivalent of $250. They are said to have donated the reward money to martial law troops. China turned its campaign of intimidation against Westerners as well. 2 reporters expelled, including the Voice of America's bureau chief, Al Pessin.
This is Pessin in Beijing. I have 2 reports, a short one.
It's no accident VOA was targeted. Its shortwave broadcasts are heard by tens of millions of Chinese, and it has reported in full on the massacre.
VOA is an uncontrolled source of information to the Chinese people. The Chinese government likes to control all the information that goes to the Chinese people.
Pessin is accused of spreading rumors and distorting facts. John Pomfret of the Associated Press accused of illegally obtaining state secrets and interviewing student leaders. Both were given 72 hours to leave the country. On the streets of the capital, the remnants of the massacre are disappearing. Not a single tank is in sight in Tiananmen Square, though plenty of soldiers remain. The strongest reminder of what went on here is the people's fear. Chinese students hoping to study in the United States timidly showed up for the reopening of the embassy's visa office. We asked one student, "Are you here because of the trouble in your country?" And he answers, "That's a very sensitive question, but I was born in China, and I can't express my own thoughts." Jackie Judd, ABC News, Beijing.
The Chinese Communist Party newspaper, The People's Daily, today published a front-page editorial warning the United States to stop interfering in China's internal affairs. The editorial condemned the U.S. for giving sanctuary to the dissident Feng Lizhi and his family in the American embassy. As ABC's John McCarthy reports from the State Department tonight, in protecting Feng, the U.S. is upholding precedent.
The U.S. is prepared to shelter Fan Lejour in the American embassy for years, if necessary, to guarantee his safety.
A long tradition has been established not only by the United States, but other Western countries. So this is not something unique happening in China today with Mr. Fong.
The most celebrated case is that of Joseph Cardinal Mincenti, who took refuge in the U.S. Embassy in Hungary in 1956 as Soviet troops crushed the Hungarian uprising. The Soviets were rounding up dissidents and throwing them in jail, just as the Chinese are doing today in Beijing. Mincenti lived in the U.S. Embassy for 15 years before the U.S. negotiated a deal to get him out of the country. The U.S. Embassy in Moscow also became a long-term refuge, this time for religious dissidents. For nearly 5 years, just out of reach of Soviet security forces, 7 Pentecostal Christians lived in the basement of the embassy until a deal was negotiated in 1983 to let them leave the country. In both of these cases and in scores of others, once the U.S. granted safe haven to a person fearing for his or her life, there was no backing down, no matter how long it took to guarantee the person's safety. And in each instance, it was the other government that gave in. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
In a moment, the other news. Who can get the savings and loan industry under control? It is costing taxpayers a fortune. And later in our broadcast, a consumer warning about summer toys. Some of them are dangerous. And one community's approach to daycare. It may soon